Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the Infinite Way, where humanity meets spirituality. I am your host, Enolia, and I am excited to bring to you Gael Orr. And let me tell you a little bit about Gael. Gael Orr is a marketing director for Once Again Nut Butter and has worked there since 2009. Gail handles all marketing activities for the Once Again Nut Butter brand with the goals in mind to increase awareness, grow sales, and introduce innovative products. She is responsible for all aspects of Once Again Nut Butter's brand management of organic nut butters in the natural foods industry. She provides leadership and coordination of all marketing and communication functions and also directs the company's private label sales management. Gail received both of her degrees from the Rochester Institute of Technology, which are a Bachelor's of Science in International Business Management and a Master's of Science in Research Development. She also studied abroad for one semester at the Sheffield Hallam College of Finance in Sheffield, England. Gail is an advocate for economic development projects that create employment in developing countries and is passionate about environmental stewardship. An avid equestrian, Gail also enjoys her 7 horses and spending time with her family and friends. Gail, we're so happy to have you. Welcome.
Thank you, Enolia.
So, in the way that I know you, in so many different aspects of life, the equestrian part of me wants to reach out and say, let's talk horses. And then there's the marketing piece that you bring to the table. And then there's just the downright contributions to humanity that you bring across the board. And I really want to go where my heart is calling. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about horses and horse training first.
Oh, okay, that's
And
fine. That's my favorite thing to talk about.
So how did you acquire your 7 horses?
Oh, every horse has kind of come to me in a different way. Some I've just purchased because I was looking for a specific horse for a specific sport. One horse I adopted through the Standardbred Retirement Foundation, and they're a nonprofit organization that gives standardbred racehorses a second chance. A lot of times they pull them out of the kill pen before the horses go to slaughter, but not always. And so I did adopt a horse through them. You met her. You had your picture taken with her. That's funny.
Yes, I did. Funny, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then most recently I got another standardbred that was gifted to me from a girlfriend who was just looking for a new home for a horse that she really loves. And she just wanted someone that would make that horse a heart horse because she's a breeder. So she has a lot of horses, and she really wanted that horse to have sort of an extra special life, I would say. And so she gifted that horse to my grandson, Kyler, and I. So we've been retraining her. She is a wonderful driving horse. We've been training her for carrying a rider. And so that's been going really well. She's a super smart, sweet horse. So we're really blessed to have her as part of our herd. But yeah, some of the horses I've bought, some I've adopted, and some have been given to me.
So the big question is, why horses? Because it could have been dogs. It could have been a number of different animals. Why horses? Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was 2 years old, my father took me to the sulky races. So sulky racing, if you don't know, it's a type of horse racing where the horse pulls a cart. And those are standardbreds. So ever since I saw my very first horse, I then just begged my dad to get me a horse ever since. Like ever since I saw my very first standardbred, I was like, I had to have a horse. And so my dad kind of like heard me begging for a horse, for a few years after as a toddler. I don't even remember it, but he tells me. And then when I was 4 years old, I had a babysitter who had a horse, and she used to ride past my house, and she would stop and pick me up and put me in the front of the saddle, and we would ride around this little village that I lived in called Nunday. And so I just, after that, I was just really sold. And then when I was 10 or 11, my dad sent me to a horse camp, like a summer camp with horses. And I was horribly homesick when I was at camp, like cried myself silly, cried myself to the point I was like physically ill because I was so homesick. But I never asked my parents to like bring me home. Like, and never, like, I talked to my mom every day and never did I say, hey, come and pick me up. And mom was waiting for me to ask for her to like come pick me up. But my love for the horses was like greater than my homesickness. And so I just kind of, I gutted it out. And then every year after that, I went to this horse camp and learned how to ride and take care of them and that kind of thing. And then I want to say it's about 13 or 14. The main horse that I always rode at camp every summer came up for sale. And so my dad purchased her because we were able to keep her at this farm as long as they used her for riding lessons. There was no expense to us. So we owned her, but they could use her. And they call that free leasing, where you're basically leasing the horse to somebody else, but you maintain ownership. And so we did that for a year or two. And then my father set up a situation at home where I could then bring her home. And so I did that. And so at the age of 15, I started giving horseback riding lessons in Nunde to my friends, and the money that I raised from teaching riding lessons, I used to defray the costs for like her horseshoes and her feed costs and stuff like that. So I like helped pay for my horse. And then finally I ended up retiring her because she was an older horse. My dad didn't buy, she wasn't a young horse by any stretch. And so I ended up retiring her and didn't really do anything with horses for a few years. And I want to say I was like about 26 when I started taking riding lessons again in a village not far from where I lived. And I'm like, I just have to have a horse. This is just crazy. Like, I knew how to ride and care for them, and I had all this experience, and I just felt like this emptiness because I just didn't have my horse. I didn't have a horse. So I ended up purchasing my first, like, this was the first horse that I purchased. His name was Lou, and he was a psychopath horse. There's just no other way of describing it. He was off the track, ex thoroughbred. He was partially blind in one eye. And that was very significant because if he had been fully blind and not able to see out of one eye, he would have adjusted better. But because he had partial vision, he didn't know what he was seeing. So he was afraid of everything. So he was very explosive. And there were so many days I would come home from working with this horse and I would say to my husband, well, I almost got killed today. Like, I said that quite a bit. Like, that happened a lot. Like, I would take a really bad fall, or he would explode and kind of shoot me off the top of his back, like, in like 10 feet into the air, like pretty serious explosion. So I contacted this horse whisperer named Frank Bell. And at the time he was living in Montana, and he is a world famous horse whisperer. He worked with Buck Brenneman, and I might have said Buck's last name a little incorrectly, but he's worked with some of the top trainers in the world. So I flew Frank out to Dansville, New York, where I was boarding my horse at the time. And I said, I just don't know what to do for this horse. And Frank said, I'll never forget this. He goes, I've been doing this for decades. And he said, you're the first person that I've met that has just this natural understanding of what's going on with the horse. He's like, you're a natural. He's like, maybe you should become one of my trainers and like learn from me and like, let me kind of mentor you along in this field. And so he started working with my horse, and he said to me, he goes, Gail, he goes, sometimes you just have to be satisfied that you've gotten a horse as far as it can go. He goes, you've made a lot of accomplishments with this horse. He goes, this is it. This is the limit that this horse can do. And he goes, and if you want this horse to do something different, then get a different horse. He's like, because this horse is giving you all that it can. And that was so freeing to have him say that to me, because I was so like desperate to help this horse and just felt like there wasn't anything I could do. And, and for him to just say, hey, you've reached this horse's limit, it was very freeing, because I just felt like there has to be more. But, what ended up happening is, I was praying for my horse. Maybe that sounds a little silly, but I was. And I'm like, I
Not to
just
me.
need an answer. There has to be something I can do. Like, I can't just put a blinder on this horse, because he's got to live with this vision issue. Like, he's got to learn how to deal with this on his own 4 feet, not just when I'm riding, but just in his life. And I was riding one day past this posted sign, and it was flapping. The wind was blowing. It was flapping in the breeze. And I rode past it, and everything was fine. And I turned the horse around because I'd forgotten something. And I went to go back to the farm, and that posted sign was still flapping, and it spooked him really bad. And I turned my horse to the right to spin him in a circle to kind of protect myself. And as soon as he saw that flapping sign out of the good eye, he settled right down. And then I had this aha moment. And I really believe it was the creator that was saying, hey, he has to build a new memory bank on that side of his brain, because horses' brains are different. They have a right and a left brain like a human does. And so when you train a horse, everything you do on the right side of the horse, you also have to do on the left side of the horse, because they don't make connections like humans do. So whatever you're doing on one side when you're training them, you also have to do it on the other side. So all of a sudden, I just had this big aha moment. Like, what I have to do is find out the things that are frightening him, and then show him those things out of his good eye, and help him to learn that what he's seeing isn't really going to hurt him. And so then it
Right.
became a challenge of trying to figure out, what is he afraid of, and how do I show it to him from the worst eye. And then I would ride tandem with a friend, and I would put my friend's horse on the bad side of his vision. On the bad eye was his right eye. And that gave him a lot of confidence, and he got a lot better. So even though I'd hit the lid on what I could train him, there still was another answer. And I had talked to trainers all over the country, Enolia. I called so many trainers. I'm like, what do I do if a horse is only partially sighted, that they've only lost part of their vision? And no one could give me an answer. And so for me to get the answer through prayer, and to get that answer through a fluke chance kind of thing, I learned a lot from that. And of all the horses that I've had throughout my lifetime, that horse taught me the most. He was the most dangerous horse, obviously, but at the same time, he taught me the most. And literally every single thing I ever learned from that horse, in some capacity or another, I've been able to apply it to a horse that I'm working with right now in my life. And I have been able to help other people. And but I don't really consider myself a horse trainer. Like, there are people that train horses for a living. They make a career out of that. That's what they do. I don't really do that. I don't take in like problematic horses and retrain them or fix them. I can't claim that I know everything.
Yeah, but I'm going to interrupt you right here because, okay, I've gotten the opportunity to be around you with horses, okay? And so I get
Yeah,
to make my statements of my observations, which is
yeah,
that you are the most intuitive person that I know around horses, their moods, their feelings, what their wants and needs are. And to have that type of intuition is a level of connection that most people don't have. Some of us have that with each other, right? We're intuitive. We anticipate the needs of our children or our families or whatever the case may be. But that connection with an animal, specifically with a horse, is a very, very special connection. And in all occasions that I've seen you, the responses that the horses have with you and the responses that you have with the horses are just, it's just a whole nother level, a whole
well,
nother
thank you
level.
for saying that. Yeah, thank you for saying that.
So I am not surprised that, first of all, this famous horse trainer and whisperer would ask you to participate, which I believe whether you did or not, you've gleaned a tremendous amount because, for those of you who don't know it and who haven't seen it, you saw me take a picture at the Native Nations Festival, which Gail is the key one of the key contributors to the Native Nations Festival by bringing the horse group that she works with and having the horses participated at the festival. And I was gifted the great fortune of being with Bunny, one of the horses, and we took a picture together. But what made that moment so special is that you shared with me, like I felt connected to that horse. I
Mm.
completely felt connected. She was allowing me to befriend her. And if anyone's been around horses before, not all horses befriend or allow you to befriend them. They don't allow you to pet them. They don't necessarily allow you to even get close to them. It depends on their mood, their attitude, everything. I mean, it's just like any other human being. If they don't want you in their personal space, they're not going to let you be in their personal space. And she allowed me in her personal space. And I could feel the connection with her. And hopefully, she felt my connection. And then you helped us like solidify that bond. And to me, that was the best thing that could have ever happened in the world. And like, that's why I was able to take a picture with her face, just nuzzling my face, because there was that connection there. Um, would you say that nature plays a key role in all that you do? How would you portray the environment by which you work in as part of what it is you do in the relationship between you and horses?
Oh, gee, I never really thought about that before. I kind of say that about 14 years ago, I became a vegetarian, and I really did that for health purposes. But what happened is about a year after I became a vegetarian, I started to feel more closely connected to the animal kingdom. And what I mean by that is when we, and this is my observation, and understand, I'm not judging anyone who eats meat. My husband eats meat. Most of my family, like, I'm not judging anyone about this, but this is about me speaking about me personally. What I discovered in myself was that for me to consume meat, there was a part of myself that was denying that an animal was killed or was harmed in some way, that an animal died and feared to feed me. And that I was denying that fear. I was denying that to justify feeding myself. And so what happened is, after about a year, all of a sudden I started to feel this freedom inside, where I started to feel a deeper appreciation for the animal kingdom. And by journeying through this place where, like, I no longer felt this guilt that I didn't even realize I had. I think it was in like the very lower levels of maybe my subconscious or something. Didn't even know that I had that until I gave it up. Definitely made me feel more connected to the animal kingdom, and it gave me a better appreciation, I think. From an environmental aspect, my career, I am a marketing director in the natural food industry, and environmentalism is a huge part of our company and what we do. And even at home, my farm, I have a 51 panel solar array, so I defray my electric usage by solar panels. And being environmentally conscious is something that came to me through my career. So preceding my career, I wasn't as consumed about the environment, but through working at, once again, Nut Butter, it made me more aware of, like, how do we engage in better environmental practices. And so and becoming a vegetarian was actually part of that too. Like, I worked here and I started to learn about vegetarianism because our products are vegan. I'm not a vegan, but I am a vegetarian. And so that whole journey kind of came together all at the same time, if that makes sense.
Right.
Do you feel that I answered your question, Enolia?
Yeah, you did. And then there's also the perspective that I'm going to just bring and talk a
Yeah.
little bit about, which is the indigenous perspective of learning how to live in balance with nature. And that
Right.
horses naturally know and live in balance with nature, which is why I believe that those who are drawn to horses really have that same similar balance in their life, that they're really outdoors people and that
Mm.
they really have this um this need to be in nature. Some people will look at this particular type of animal, this horse, and go, "Oh my God, I would never get on a horse. It's too big. It's blah 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 blah." But I'm going to tell you that my experience. So I started riding horses when I was probably 8 years old. I went to Girl Scout camp, and that's where I met my first horse. And then from there, I realized that there was actually horses, a horse stable that I could ride while I was growing up in New York City. Who would believe that? That I could go and I could ride in the stable. So I used to go and I ride in the stables, and then I eventually didn't have an encounter with horses for the next 10 years until after I graduated college, got married, moved upstate New York. And then, where I had the great fortune of meeting a dear friend of mine who had like several horses, like you do. And she would say, "Oh, come out, hang out with me, we'll go ride." And it was the first time I ever rode bareback, and understanding, like, oh my God, the appreciation of somebody riding bareback and how they did it. I don't even know, because you have to have the strongest knees and legs ever possible. But not only that, being able to start understanding how to groom and work with the horses. And I rode Western. So, and then we used to exercise the horses, my friend being with her. And so, in exercising the horses, also, there was this freedom that I couldn't experience ever. And I only experienced with riding with a horse, with running with a horse, with trotting with the horse, and going through the different iterations of the speeds that it can go. But it was like this freedom in my heart, freedom in my soul that I experienced, that I wanted to keep going. So for me, I shared this with you before. I will have horses when I retire, where I can sit down and I have my land, my horses, that connection and bond with them. And that's how I want to live it out, because they are such special, special, special,
Mhm.
special animals, and so, and then to understand that bond and then take it to the level of any animal, because all animals have are capable of gleaning that connection. I had this moment with a zebra one time, and people thought I was crazy. And the zebra came up, and not only did it rub its face against mine, but like as I was talking to the zebra and connecting with the zebra, it was closing its eyes and opening its eyes, and we just had this moment. So I just, to me, it's like a whole nother level and a whole nother world
Mm.
that we are just so naive about in our daily fast pace, gotta rush, gotta go to it lives,
Right.
that if we just slowed down and took a moment and took a breath, that a whole new world would open up. I don't know how you feel about what I said, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, I think I better understand your question too. Like, so definitely, yes, what you're saying is true. I'm definitely an outdoors person. On the weekends, I'm outside the entire time, even in the winter time. It's not unlike maybe outside for between 6 and 8 hours,
Yeah.
just doing whatever. So yeah, that's definitely true. Um, I think too, like one thing to understand, like I think it's healthy that people do have fear, because the horse is a powerful animal and they can injure you. And when horses interact with each other, when you watch them and observe, they kick each other, they bite each other, they push each other around.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the part of how they establish their own sort of pecking order in the herd, if I can use that word. I'm not so sure that they have a true hierarchy, but I would say an order of respect is probably a better way of looking at it. Is they push each other around, they kind of drive each other around, and then
Right.
they bond with each other, and then they join up and have like an acknowledgement of each other. So I think it's important that there's balance, so like part of like having connection with the horse is also to have this mutual respect, right? So like, I'm not going to let the horse push me around, and I'm not going to let the horse crowd out my space, right? So the horse has to respect my space and respect my boundaries, but I also need to respect that horse's boundaries and that horse's space. And sometimes the biggest reward I can actually give a horse is just to step away from it and give it its space. So if I'm teaching a horse to do something new, the reward isn't necessarily a pet, although sometimes that's a nice thing to do. Sometimes the best reward I can give the horse is to take 3 or 4 steps backwards, just give them their space, because horses are a bit claustrophobic. And so sometimes that can be a really positive thing to do. And they'll often tell you if it's the right thing to do, because you'll see them start to lick and kind of chew a little bit with their mouth. And when you see that licking, that means they're thinking. And so sometimes, understanding that is important. And, just like if, I mentioned that because I think some people come in and they're all about, kind of loving on the horse and connecting with the horse without having that
Right.
balance. And that's important too, because they can be dangerous. They really can be. I mean, 95% of the work I do with horses is on the ground. Riding is like the cherry on the sundae. So you have to love cleaning up after them. You have to love, grooming and medicating if they're sick. And it doesn't matter what crisis I might be going through, the horses still have to be fed, right? So like my daughter died, 9 years ago, and even grieving and going through that process, I still had to go out and take care of my horses every day, because no matter what I'm going through, they still have to be cared for. If I'm sick, I still have to go out and make sure that they're taken care of, right? They still have to have their feet trimmed every 6 weeks. They still have to have veterinary care. They still have to be vaccinated. And so I think that, horses can make people less self-centered, right? Because you're giving to them, but make no mistake about it. They give back everything they receive. They give back everything that they receive. They do.
Absolutely. So I'm going to switch gears on you just a little bit. I want to talk about the picture of you riding with the red dress, and talk a little bit about the Red Dress Project.
Sure. Yeah. So, when I was first invited to come to Native Nations Festival, I had met Tom Zajac, who is the executive director, at a different Native American event. And while I was there, they had a display on the Red Dress Project. So I went home and I Googled it because I never heard anything about it. And I realized, well, the Red Dress Project was an artistic display about an artist who was hanging up red dresses to make people ask questions about, like, why are these red dresses, like maybe hanging in a tree or whatever. And that led me down the path of finding an organization called Native Hope. And I did not realize that more than 5,000, almost 6,000 predominantly women come up missing every year just in the state of Montana alone. So the Red Dress Project is bringing attention to missing, murdered, and Indigenous women. And what I found astounding is that what qualifies as a woman are infants, children, teenagers, young adults, middle-aged, and elderly women. So women encapsulates every age group. And I find it to be quite heartbreaking, honestly. I mean, it's heartbreaking anyway, but the idea that the children and the elderly are also coming up missing, and then to learn that there's a percentage of that are also boys and teenagers and young men and older men are also part of those statistics. So the Missing, Murdered, and Indigenous Women's movement is about bringing attention to that. Like, these women come up, and in some cases males, come up missing every single year at, you know, between 5,000 and 6,000 people a year come up missing, and nobody knows what has happened to them. They just disappear, they vanish. And it's heartbreaking. I mean, it's absolutely heartbreaking to think that this is going on in the United States. And I think there's also a component that's happening in Canada as well. And so when I was invited to bring horses to Native Nations Festival, I'm like, this is something that I should bring attention to, right? Like, it should be more than just some pamphlets on a table, but like maybe there's a visual impact that can be made to help people ask even more questions about it, right? And I went home and Googled it. How many people pick up a brochure and about the Red Dress Project and actually go the next step and Google it? I'm not sure how many people do that. So, and I'm not a Native American, although at one time I was married to a Native American. I gave birth to a Native American, so my daughter is Native and my grandson is Native, but I'm not Native personally. So I thought, well, I can wear a red dress and ride on a horse and bring attention to a very serious Native American issue. This is something that I can do. And what a greater impact I can make because I'm sitting on a horse, right? And so that's the center of attention is, you know, the horses come in and start the processional, start the service in the morning, and then we close it in the afternoon with our processional. So I'm like, you know, if we make a statement and all of us ladies wear a red dress, maybe somebody will ask us, like, why are you all wearing like red dresses at a Native American festival? And then we can talk about that. And then this last year, one of our ladies, her name is Dot, she's part of the Native Nations steering committee. She put up a beautiful display and hung red dresses in the trees and had a really beautiful display at the festival that helped make a bigger connection on like why all of our ladies were wearing red dresses and that rode. And the men that rode were Native regalia, but the women, whether they were Native or not, wore a red dress. And then some of our ladies who were Native that rode wore red handprint over their face, which is symbolic of women being silenced, but also taking a stand, like we can't be silenced. We can't allow this silence to continue. And so I would just encourage your listeners to look up nativehope.org and donate money to their cause. And because they're trying to address this issue and they're trying to bring attention to what's going on and to actually do something about it. And, you know, I used to work in the nonprofit sector, and I can tell you that I had people that just donated like $10 a month or $20 a month to the work that we were doing. And it was so nice to be able to like depend on that monthly income, that little bit. And when you get a lot of people that do this little bit every single time, that can be very helpful from a cash flow standpoint for a charity.
Okay.
But whether people donate once or ongoing, I would just encourage it, but definitely get an education on it, at least read about it and hear what's going on.
Yeah. I'm actually going to do an emphasis on that. We hold a speaking platform every other month, you know, and this month it's actually I'm a Global Champion is the title, and it's about women's issues. So I'm a global champion, and then what particular women's issues that we're dealing with. And so as a keynote, I'm going to be bringing forward the Red Dress Project. And, you know, thank you for sharing about Native Hope. And I have an organization, Expressions of Humanity, that can turn around, collect and turn around and give it right to Native Hope. We do a lot of that. We'll just highlight a particular area that we want to focus on for the month or for the couple of months. And then we donate to those organizations, those other NGOs or nonprofits, or we donate directly to the people. This is something very passionate too. And I'm going to reach out eventually to my grandmother elder, another grandmother, Isabel Mawaski, who actually has been doing a lot of work with the fact that Native women are missing in Canada, a great deal. She's actually been spearheading the organization that has been looking to help find these women and putting in actual stopgaps for trafficking and educating women on how to know when not to be alone and how possibly you could come up missing. And it's interesting also, Another friend of mine, I was just speaking with her last night. She's Indigenous African, and she has created a actual product that helps, that is being propagated to women. So a longer distance on pepper spray, stun
Mm.
guns, like being armed so that you basically have a chance if something like that were to happen with you. So it's really interesting to understand that this is a problem across the board for women,
Yeah.
period, for women. Just bridging the gaps. Hopefully, I love trying to do that, at least bridging the gaps of putting
Mhm.
certain people together so that we can talk about the projects and what some people are doing to take action about it and how to support it. So thank you so much for sharing a little bit about that. I wanted our insiders also, I'm going to switch gears on you again,
That's okay.
and the fact that you are a world traveler. And would you talk to us a little bit about what inspired you to travel and where some of the places that you've traveled, and what brought you there?
Um, you know, I've always traveled, even since I was a small child. My parents really uh, took my brother, sister, and I to places. As an adult, I think what really kicked off the travel bug was, I have a lot of friends that are from various places, and so I kind of started with me just visiting some friends like in Sweden and taking some vacations, maybe in Mexico. And then I studied abroad in England for a semester. And while I was there, my daughter and I were able to like backpack Ireland, Scotland, France, Sweden, Denmark. We went to about 9 different countries. And I really enjoyed that. And while I was in college, I got involved with an organization called Volunteers in Mission, and it was through the United Methodist Church that I got involved with their program. And I had a couple of friends that were in the Peace Corps. And my friend Wendy Owens, she was in the Peace Corps in Paraguay and had these schools that she was starting, but didn't have school supplies. And so I remember going to my home church and saying, if everybody brought in a couple of pens and pencils and a notepad, I could send them to Paraguay, and like she could get her school established. And so the church did that. And so I flew to Paraguay and took a small team of people, and we took in hundreds of pounds worth of school supplies for this school. And then she was in the Peace Corps at the time, and my husband helped to like install a water system for the school. And it just felt good to get involved. And so her mother was from Peru. Wendy's mom is from Peru. Her name is Luisa Rios. She's a professor at RIT. She said, well, you should come to Peru. So I'm like, okay, I'll go to Peru. So I flew to Peru, and we did some work there to help her school. And then I started getting involved in disaster relief work. So I started going in and helping with hurricane relief response. And during Hurricane Katrina, I went down and worked with a program called the Goodness Project. They're a Canadian organization, and they set up a food pantry and kitchen. And I ended up working as a volunteer coordinator, and I coordinated that entire situation where they were giving out groceries, feeding people. They had a warehouse for distribution, and they had a medical team that was there. And I got evacuated because the next hurricane came in. And then I ended up going back to New Orleans, because New Orleans got hit a second time because there were 3 storms, like Hurricane Rita, Wilma, and Katrina. So I went down to New Orleans and helped, got evacuated again. And the Goodness Project said, hey, would you be willing to go to Galveston, Texas? Because we think the next storm is going to hit Galveston. And I said, yeah, I would go. And I was in Tennessee kind of waiting, and then it ended up, the storm diverted and hit New Orleans a second time, and it didn't hit Galveston. So I ended up going back to New Orleans. So I was doing a lot of disaster response work, and I felt very useful because I worked in supply chain logistics at Xerox for a while. So like managing their warehouse, that disaster center utilized every positive skill set I had as a manager and coordinator. So I felt like I was like really useful. And then I got involved with a woman that I met just on a chance thing. She was flying in from Kenya. Her name was Faith Deus. And she was going to this little teeny tiny church that had like 6 people in the church. It's like the smallest congregation you could possibly imagine. But even though there's only 6 people in that church, they were one of my biggest contributors for any international project I was working on to help address hunger, poverty. They were always involved. And I said to my husband, I go, we have to go to that church this Sunday because this woman is flying all the way in from Kenya and we need to put our butts in the seats and make that church feel a little bit bigger because she's flying all the way from Kenya and she's going to speak on a Sunday and we need to be supportive of this church, all the things they've done for us. Well, unbeknownst to me, that started a friendship that has lasted since 2006. And Faith and I, we talk every single week. I flew to Kenya. We helped build a school there. We put in water systems. We built dormitories. We put in latrines. We purchased 20 or 30 cows that we were able to give to widows that were, engaged in subsistence farming. And then at the same time that this was going on, a really good friend of mine, Sarah Haver-Turwey, was in South Africa and got involved with a program called Funanani. And it's an equestrian center now. She was a horse person and she sold everything she had. And she had this horse that was worth a lot of money. I mean, thousands and thousands of dollars. And she sold this horse. She raised it since it was a baby. I mean, this was like her most prized possession, so that she had the money to go to Africa and like help this school. And she adopted something like 13 or 14 children. She has 2 biological children of her own, but she has like 15 or 16 of her and her husband of children. And not that long ago, I want to say maybe half a dozen years ago, she started buying horses. And now they're using horses to help rehabilitate children who have been through a lot, every type of abuse you can possibly imagine, and an abuse that you've never imagined that some of these kids have been through. And they've been addressing emotional healing using horse therapy. And I had the ability to work with her in Namibia, Africa. She invited me there before she went to South Africa. She was in Namibia. And it was funny, the charity that was there wasn't going to let me come. They said, we're full. We don't have room for another volunteer. And Sarah said, no, you need Gail. She's a horse trainer and these horses need training. And so they found a space for me to come in and I trained horses for a week. And it was a very powerful experience. And she ended up ultimately moving to South Africa because the Funanani program, the headmistress who was in charge of the school had passed away. So Sarah just rolled right into that and became the headmistress, and she started to manage that whole program. And she's been there for probably 10, probably even longer than 10 years, maybe closer to 15 now. Oh. So I kind of got involved doing that. And then ultimately I left the nonprofit sector and I came to work here at Once Again Nut Butter. And they were looking for someone to work with their fair trade program, and they wanted someone to help with their economic development projects because they do a lot of work in Nicaragua. And so I then started getting involved in the work in Nicaragua where they were growing sesame seeds and they put in peanuts as a rotation crop. And once again, it's been committed to that work in Central America for over 20 years. And those farms kind of have a story where they started out as like, they put in 4 acres of test plots. And then now today it's like 2,000 farmers and they're selling their sesames into the world market, not just to Once Again Nut Butter. So it's not a codependent relationship by any stretch.
Right.
Right. So I've been involved in the fair trade work of our company ever since I started here. And so what's been nice about being here Once Again is when I was in the nonprofit sector, I worked 10 years fundraising, and the amount of money that I fundraised over 10 years is less money than what Once Again gives in 1 year. And so the economic impact that Once Again Nut Butter has is so much greater than anything that I experienced in the nonprofit sector. And so I'm very proud and have a tremendous amount of intrinsic reward from being here because of the work that this company does. So that's kind of like the big story on why I travel so much. I travel all the time. Pre-COVID, I was on an airplane like 8 times a year. Post-COVID, a couple of times a year. But yeah, thanks for asking about that.
Oh my gosh. So what wisdom, because I know that we've been going for a while. So I want to kind of finish it off, but what wisdom would you give that person out there that wants to contribute to humanity? What wisdom would you share or have them step into?
So I think that the best way that people can contribute to humanity is to look no further than just having a heart of forgiveness. Because if you have a true heart of forgiveness, then you're making your heart more accepting and open to receiving love. And if you're a person who's loving, then you're naturally going to end up in a journey where you're going to want to look out for other people. And I want to just clarify, when I say forgiveness, I'm not talking about trust. And I think people confuse forgiveness with trust. When I forgive someone, it doesn't mean that I trust them again. But what my parents have taught me is that forgiveness is the process by which we give people a second chance, a third chance, a 10th chance. It doesn't mean that I give people the opportunity to put a knife in my back again, but it means I give people the ability to try again without expectation of success. And it means that I personally let go of feelings of resentment. I let go of feelings of vengeance. I let go of feelings of wanting someone else to experience their karma. So forgiveness is really about letting go of my feelings of hostility and allowing myself to give people the freedom to be who they are and accept them for who they are, warts and all. Doesn't mean I have to trust them, just means that I extend that love, because love should be without condition. And if I have an expectation that someone is going to be successful when they're given another chance, I'm putting a condition on that love. And so if I have a heart of forgiveness, then I have a much greater capacity for love. And when I have that greater capacity for love, then the Creator will put me on the journey where I can give that love out to other people and receive that love back unto myself. And so that would be what I would say is the best way for people to start on the journey of humanity.
I love it. And we're going to end it right there. What beautiful words. I'm not even going to contribute to it. It was well stated, full round, beautiful. Gael Orr, thank you so much for sharing a part of yourself. Thank you for allowing us to take a peek in the box of someone who is just
Sure.
the silent, quiet hero, but hero nonetheless. And thank you for your contributions. We're so grateful to have had this conversation. And thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Enolia. I really appreciate you inviting me to be part of this. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I'm very grateful that you gave me the opportunity. And so I wish you well, and I wish your listeners well.
Thank you, and bye-bye, everyone.